right, we've seen a lot of Ed Smith from 5 Star Engine Exchange related to building that Lincoln Flathead V12. And I thought it would be good to head over and talk to him and get to know him a little more by way of his history. He's got an interesting history, somewhat historical in some ways. And I think it'd be worth the time to give you guys a chance to get to know him a little more, know his background a little more. And personally, I want to know that stuff myself. So I'm going to bring you along. I'm going to interview Ed, talk about his career a little bit, and go from there. So here we go. So we're here with Ed Smith.
Yes, we are.
Ed Smith has already been a little bit of a legend for us on our channel, BarryT's Garage.
Yes, he has.
And we thought it'd be a good time here to stop and maybe get to know a little more about Ed himself, his background, and you know, how does it come about that here's this guy working on a Flathead Lincoln V12 engine? Where did he come from for that to be something he would do? And of course, there's a lot more to it, and we thought it'd be a good time to you know, have a little talk with Ed. Ed, when did you meet JB? Do you remember kind of how things got started with you guys?
I really don't remember that much about it, other than he was in the fiberglass business, and I kind of know where he got into the fiberglass business in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I got Ed's name from something that never really ever happens in business anymore, from another engine builder. And the guys across the way over here who are really talented engine builders, we're 6 or 8 months out, and I said, look, I said, I can't wait 6 or 8 months. I got to get this engine sooner than that. And they said, well, you got to go over to see Ed then. Mm-hmm. And I said, Ed, what's an Ed? You know? And they said, Ed will take care of it. But okay. You know, to have one engine builder recommend another engine builder, especially a really good one, it takes a lot of you know, character for one guy to recommend another, because he's competition.
Sure. Yeah.
And they were very high on Ed, and he's proven to be even more talented than they described him.
Okay, so let me take another step further back then. So Ed, how did you first become associated with building engines? What's your background?
I started tinkering with automotive, and I think it was survival. When we were kids, 13, 14 years old, if we wanted something broken, it was broken, and we wanted it fixed, we had to fix it ourselves. We couldn't afford to take it anywhere else, and it was just trial and error, and you tore it apart and tried to fix it the best your way and cobble it up maybe or something, got it running, and it ran fine.
What year was this roughly? 40s?
Yeah, in the 40s, yeah.
And that was where? Where
I grew up in Ohio.
He's in Ohio. And the rural part of
a little small town, 150 people.
Okay.
And grew up there and went to high school, all 12 years in high school, the same high school, grade school.
How did you happen to get out here? What was the motivation to come out here?
Well, another friend of mine was, I worked at a Dodge dealer. The day I got out of high school, I started to work at the Dodge dealer. And I had a chance to drive a tractor mowing the side of the road, grass along the highway, for a few dollars an hour, or work in the garage. And I said I'd never own the highway, but someday I'll own my own garage. So I took, that was my choice.
That was a realistic choice.
Yeah, a realistic choice, and for $1 an hour.
Okay.
And I got a 5-cent an hour raise every month. The guy I worked for, that was in '59. The guy I worked for was probably the smartest mechanic in the whole area.
Yeah.
Was an older guy, not so much older, but he taught everybody. And in those days, it was the big deal to be the head mechanic at the Chevy dealer.
Right.
Or the head mechanic at the Ford dealer, because you knew everything.
Yeah.
And all these guys, I found out, all worked for this Paul Casebeer at one time.
Okay.
And so I says, if he taught them, good instructor, in those days you couldn't pay to go to an automotive training school like you can today, $35,000 for a couple of years. So we had to learn it the best way we knew how, so that was my education. So in racing, I started racing when I guess we were all competitive. Racing the neighbor kid out in front of the house, drag racing.
Right.
So in front of our house, it was just, the pavement was just solid black marks. And we had a big yard, and every Sunday afternoon, we lived between 2 bigger towns, and all the kids from one town would come over and all the rest of them, so sometimes the yard was full of cars and girls, and we liked both.
They do go
anyways,
together.
we got argued who could beat so-and-so was out in the street and had a drag race down the street.
Okay.
And so that would end up, and then the next week we'd fix our cars and make them a little faster if we got beat or if we won either one.
Okay.
So we started, in the high school I worked a couple nights a week at home in the garage, worked on my friends' cars, 53 Chevys, 52 Fords, things like that, and made them faster and faster, and we could do whatever we could mechanically, and even then that turned into drag racing. So
Did you get involved in formalized drag racing out there?
in formalized drag race, I drag raced in Toledo. I still have my trophy. It's sitting in the office there. The very first trophy I ever got, and that was probably in 1960.
Okay, what kind of car were you?
A 36 Ford.
Okay.
Had a Chevy motor in it, and I ran a gas class.
Okay. What specifically, what gas class?
Probably a C gas,
Okay.
because I had to race against a 56 Chevy with, he had Hillborn injectors on it, 56 Chevy two-door sedan.
Okay.
And he was a heavier car and a bigger motor, and I had a lighter car with a smaller motor. It was a 265 Chevy, bored out to 283. And with two 4-barrels, two carburetors on it.
Okay.
And I raced that for many years.
Were you successful at that in your class?
Just a trophy.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
mean, but did you win?
Yeah, we won, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you beat that guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was going to be the first of many people that didn't like you
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah. So then, and then I fixed all my friends' cars, and we would sometimes take 4 or 5 cars and a little bit of a caravan and go down to Muncie, Indiana, and raced. And maybe over to Terre Haute, Indiana, and raced drag races.
Mm-hmm.
We were gone, we'd leave Saturday night late and get home Sunday night late. Drove the cars there and hoped to drive them home. Maybe tow them home once in a while, but not very often. And the cars, if we look back at them now, they were so primitive. Mm-hmm. Those cars, and
Oh, yeah.
and
In the beginning.
just like E.J. Potter with his motorcycle would become famous. And I remember the first time they took it to the track, I was standing right there. And what a primitive car. It looked like I'd welded on it. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
But
You got to start somewhere.
and everybody enjoyed it, and they cheered. And I remember the announcer said that for E.J. Potter, it was his lifetime ambitions to be 21 years old. and that was a good thing.
Still
So,
is.
but he's famous now. He passed away and lived in Florida later on. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there still are classes in drag racing even to this day where an average guy can go out there and have a chance of winning.
Yeah, you can win a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And at this time, we chose different cars and at racing. We won national titles years ago,
Yeah. And what was
national
that?
championships,
What was that in? Yeah.
and
What
what?
was the championship in? What was the
American
name of
Hot
the
Rod
class?
Association. We
Okay.
raced that time.
Well,
Was
what
in,
class were you running?
probably a hot rod class with
Okay.
Watley's Camaro and
Okay.
and a little Nova we had, and then we got into the faster cars and dragsters and Aldards and stuff, and we had a fuel Aldard that really was extremely fast, and we won a lot of races locally with that car.
Okay.
And at that time we could win $250, $300 or $500 on one night.
Yeah.
And
And
the
put
other
yourself back
cars
in
are-
that time, that was enough to
yeah,
pay for your tires and some of your
Yeah.
mechanical costs. And
yeah,
I mean, you could at least cover a lot of your expenses with that.
yeah.
And
So where did your racing career take you to? Like, what are some of the top things you recall from that time?
Well, we would have raced even a slower car because we knew that our slower car was extremely fast with our category, and basically it was really extremely hard to beat us
yeah.
because it just physics, and like he said, physics and the part of it it's just extremely hard to beat us, and so we would win national championships a couple years in a row with those cars.
Right.
And like one time in Denver, I raced a car myself and drove it and everything else. And that weekend, I think we won our eliminator bracket, and it paid me $3,500 for one race.
What year would
Wow.
this be roughly?
That probably was in '75 or '76, something like that. And at that time, I bought a new Ford truck from the dealer down here and paid about $3,500 for cabin chassis, brand new.
Just on that one winnings.
Yeah, on that one winnings.
Wow.
And that year we made a lot of money
Yeah.
racing.
Yeah.
And so I guess, and then that's the year that the '76 where they cut the gas. You couldn't buy gasoline.
Right.
So then all the sponsors cut their money in half.
Okay.
So we basically stopped racing right there.
Yeah. Couldn't afford it.
Because we couldn't afford it because our gas prices, we used to play buy gas cheap,
Right.
and then the sponsors paid us sometimes money whether we won or not.
Right.
They
Just to
paid
have
us
their name
motel
on the
money,
side of the car.
and a lot of the sponsors then, like Mr. Gasket and STP and Pennzoil and the tire company, give us all of our stuff free.
Right, which is a huge.
Whatever
amount
we
of
wanted in the catalog, Mr. Gasket catalog, we got it free.
Yeah.
And the Autometer instruments was all free.
So they had a lot of
What
faith
do we
in your
want?
ability to
Yeah, they had
represent them at the races.
at the races, yeah, and we did too.
Yeah.
The car was always spotless clean, and we kept it clean, and
Yeah.
we're real competitive and professional about it too. We didn't argue or do
Now,
anything.
you didn't just
so.
do drag racing, you also got involved in other types of racing, right?
Yeah, we did a lot of sprint car racing. That's the dirt track racing,
Right,
and we have one of our friends now is still racing today,
really?
and
Now roughly what period is this, what years?
probably
roughly.
70s. We actually raced dirt track racing probably in 70, 71 too
Okay.
at the local track here, and
okay.
we won
Manzanita, you mean?
car championship that year.
Really?
After that, we would have some out-of-towners come and race and done quite well. But even though we didn't have near enough money as a concrete company like Allied Concrete or some of those big people that had a lot of money,
Right.
we can't afford to race against them and be competitive.
Right.
So we were lucky to finish 6th or 7th, and we're happy with that, and
Right.
and made $500 a race or something.
Yeah.
And
So tell me how, obviously you're a winning racer, but still there must be a story for how that transitioned into your engine building and other related businesses you have now. What happened for that to happen?
In racing, we end up learning a lot, and of course you made a better mousetrap than anybody else. And we figured out ways to make our car not necessarily faster, but it lived longer. Our motors
Which is a big
lasted
part of
longer
winning.
forever.
Yeah.
Some years ago, I made a motor for one of my friends in a little pavement truck, a little black S10 truck he raced on pavement. It's like a NASCAR truck.
Right.
And he ran that motor 7 years,
Jeez.
and the same motor.
Wow.
Good
And
Lord.
just freshened up once in a while, but they ran the motor
Which is
7 years.
unheard of, really.
Yeah, unheard of. So,
Yeah.
but our motors would last longer than anybody else's. If you can last a little longer, that's a good chance to win the race.
Yep. Yeah.
And we won some dirt track racing over the years, quite a few championships, and like we won a championship in Boone, Iowa in 2002 with our race car, and there was about 450 race cars that
Gee.
year, that weekend in the race.
450 cars. And you
Yeah.
finished
And
first.
and Boone, Iowa, it's a nationals. So we won that race. We led all the laps. It was a 40-lap race that we ran. We led all the laps except one.
Wow.
So, and then that paid us a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then next year, all the sponsors give us everything free for that car because they like to sponsor the winner.
Were you able to parlay some of that money into your businesses you have
Not
today?
really.
Or
We
was
put it
just-
back in the car most
Okay,
of the time.
Right.
And we had some local sponsors that the car dealerships and
Right. But it allowed
plumbing
you to
company
be
and
able to
stuff.
afford to do that,
Yes.
wherein maybe it would have been a stretch to have to pay
Yeah.
for all this stuff and travel
Yeah.
all over the country. and
Yeah.
that sort of-
One
So-
year, I think we started, and that ain't been too many years ago, that we had a separate bank account for that car because that's only right.
Right.
And before the season started, with all our sponsorship money and whatever else, we had about 20,000 in that account before the season started. And that was to buy new tires and paint or whatever we wanted, or we didn't need much for the car.
That'd be very unusual.
But that's a competitiveness that the regular person that we understood that was just doing it on a part-time thing had not much chance of beating
No.
us. That had very little to do with our business that we have now,
Right.
with actually the 5-star engine business.
Okay.
Okay.
It just
Yeah.
gave you the knowledge.
It just gives us the knowledge to build it. We still change our motors from time to time to make them last longer, even our production motors.
Right.
Okay.
We're always changing
I
something.
remember when you were building the 12 for us, that there were coming areas of the engine that were just not very well thought out, or parts just weren't available anymore. And so Ed would refuse to just push through and do something that was passable. He would just say, no, we're going to stop, we're going to fix this, we're going to make it better. before we move on. And that is why a lot of the time was devoted to trying to find the things in the processes to get the engine to be actually better than it was stock.
Yeah.
Because it has some deficiencies like every engine, and now they're a million years old, and parts are hard to find, and the blocks are filthy. I just remember it was a constant process, and I always wanted to push on the gas pedal and say, let's make this thing go faster. And my, you know, the devil and the angel's going, shut up, don't start that. This guy will pitch you out on your ear, you know, 'cause that's not the way he rolls. And
Right.
I just come to respect that way of thinking about things.
Yeah.
Because if it takes longer, it takes longer. And in the world we live in, it's all about do it now, do it faster, do it. You know what? It doesn't change. You still have to take the time to do it well. And if you're dealing with a motor like a V12, you just got to take the time it takes. And if the customer doesn't like it, well, they just have to get used to it. There's nothing you can do about it, really. Because once it goes out the door, that's what I fear, is that we didn't do our job, the motor has trouble, and now it reflects back on us. So pushing it out the door is a very bad idea.
Yeah.
And I see it happen way too often now, with people being, you know, always in a hurry. There's things that don't need to be in a hurry. And the V12 is certainly one of them in my mind.
So Ed, when you're thinking back to that Flathead V12 that we've made quite a few videos on, what were some of the highlights or lowlights, whatever, difficulties and victories in putting that thing together, right, starting from the block that you were given?
I don't know, there was not much difficult. It's just an old motor. You just be careful with it so you don't do anything that would destruct the motor or anything like this. Is you don't find them very often, or something rebuildable. But I think just put it together and be careful.
Mm-hmm.
And changed a few things like some of the oil systems on it. We changed that so it oil better, different clearance, engine clearances and stuff like that, so it runs smoother and better. And they did run a lot better than they did stock. They had, in those days, in 30s and 40s, they didn't have much engineering as with their lifter systems and stuff like this that they do with today's lifters. And now we have roller lifters and hydraulics, and you can start the car up and a half a mile down the road, you're going 70 miles an hour in the traffic.
Right.
That's the engines today, and you couldn't do that those days at all. You had to warm it up in the carport for a half an hour before you could move it.
Yeah. Well,
So-
speaking of lifters, that was one of the changes you made on this engine, wasn't it? Can you describe what you did and what the difference, results in it?
Well, the lifters, the original lifters were so not thought after or not engineered. They kind of didn't know what they were doing, and they would bleed down or say collapse, even if you left it set overnight. So the next morning it had to crank it a few times to get it to start up.
Okay.
And they were so spongy that sometimes that they wouldn't, with the sponginess in the lifters and the bad tolerance in the stock lifters, that it wouldn't have as much cam lift or valve lift as a regular solid lifter.
Okay.
So once you corrected that and put the solid lifters in it and converted the motor over with oil galleys, plugged some of them and stuff, and moved it into a solid lifter, it would start instantly.
Yeah.
With a half a turn. And then we had gained all that lifter or valve lift that we lost in the hydraulic lifters. It was true valve lift then.
Okay.
And the engine run much better and smoother and a lot more peppier than more of a hot rod motor, even though it was still stock.
Right. Well, one thing JB and I noticed when we did that first startup with you, it seems quite responsive, like really surprisingly responsive.
That's the valve lift.
Okay.
Yeah, quicker back like it's supposed to be, like the original design, but they messed it up by putting those hydraulic lifters in it. And we know that the hydraulic lifters were non-adjustable, so that motor would basically last a long time, even though that a normal V12 engine, probably if you had one today, would maybe have 20,000 miles on it.
Right.
Compared to the old Flathead motors, sometimes they would have been overhauled many times and maybe couple 100,000 miles on those motors.
Sure.
Yeah, so that makes this updated the V12 motor into a more of a respective performance and running ability. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So we were always happy with that.
When you rebuild one, the way Ed is, that he's looking at that particular motor with that particular characteristics and clearances, and so he can pay attention to what he's got in front of him, not engines going by 25 miles an hour. There was
Assembly line, yeah.
Yeah, an assembly line, and they were also built to different standards, like Ed was saying. That hydraulic lifters, in some ways, were better in terms of technically, but they had all these practical problems to go along with them. And people today do not want to deal with lifters that have to pump up, and you know, it was all about different things in those days. Now you want it to start and run and start and run and continue to do that.
Right.
You're not worried about the sound of the engine or whether or not it's making noise or not. Solids are make a little more noise. That's another thing that is pretty much true of all solids. But at the same time, they tend to last longer. They tend to perform a little better, and you don't have the problems of the hydraulics, like you said, taking a while to pump up and become functional.
Okay.
So,
And then look, just like you said, that back in racing and experiences, things like this, and then the friends that we knew. In the old days, we knew everybody.
sure.
All the manufacturers know who we were,
Right.
because we won all the races and won a lot of national brackets and stuff, and the announcers at the racetracks all knew who we are. And of course, in those days, whoever you knew, it was just we didn't go there to be famous. We went there to the competitive part of it, to win the race and prove that our car nobody could beat us, or at least it's going to be hard to beat us.
Right.
So that the competitive part of it wasn't. We didn't do that to make money.
No.
But we
It
made,
was a
or to
different
get
spirit.
fame. We just, the competitive part of it, all of our races has always been the competitive edge, and that's what we enjoyed.
Yeah.
And so today, even I go back and look at some of my friends that I've known for 30 years or more, and sometimes I'll call them. I'm not afraid to call them, and they enjoy a visitation. And sometimes I'll have problems finding product. So the last motor you guys built, I had to go back to my friends and call him up. And he did an excellent job at Total Seal Rings.
Okay.
And he found a few rings here and a few rings there, and put the whole package together within a short time, a few days. I had this set of rings that was almost impossible to find.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
So-
That
Yeah, it
was
was a real
quite a
stumbling
chore.
So I'd go back to my friends, and it was always good to us.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for all the work that you did on that V12. It was really a lot of fun to follow it along and make some videos along the way. And we look forward. I know it's probably some of the viewers are teased a little bit by some of the shiny stuff behind you. Maybe someday we'll have a chance to talk to you some more about some of these other cars and things you have going on.
This is my man cave.
Yeah.
I've had this for several years and collected a bunch of stuff, and I enjoy it. This is part of my life, and that's what I do enjoy every day, is to talk to you people and build a few motors once in a while. And I'm not building the motors for any money or whatever it is, cost plus. But anyways, I have fun to do it, and that's what life was all about.
That's fantastic. It's a pleasure for me to get to know you a little bit along this way. It's really great.
I want to say one thing. The owner of that engine said to me flat out that when we were stumbling and having a hard time finding parts, you know, he said, I'm just really hopeful that Ed is the guy who finishes that motor. And he doesn't know you personally, but now he knows you personally, and he just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Very
for sticking
good.
in there.
You're welcome.